Good evening, friends. This is the 27th edition of the Study Circle meeting, and I welcome you all. I now call upon Mr. E. Om Prakash, Senior Advocate, to give the welcome address to the today's resource person, Honorable Mr. Justice G.R. Swaminathan. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the Study Circle, I extend a very warm and hearty welcome to Honorable Justice G.R. Swaminathan, who has graciously consented to deliver this session on an important topic. The Speaker of the Day, Justice Swaminathan, does not require an introduction to the legal fraternity. He normally speaks through his judgment, which are erudite and stand for his tall stature in the society. But in any case, the custom requires that I need to introduce the speaker for the day, and I also have a bounden duty to welcome him to the session, and hence I continue. Justice Swaminathan comes from a very modest family from Thiruvarur and had completed his law graduation from Central Law College, Salem, and Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, Pondicherry. As an advocate, he had an outstanding practice and had a mark for himself in the fields of civil, criminal, and constitutional laws. And he had also represented various statutory bodies, public sector undertakings, and various other institutions before the High Court. The Speaker of the Day had held various positions as Assistant Public Prosecutor, Additional Public Prosecutor, and he had also been a member of Lok Adalats. He also served as the Assistant Solicitor General of India at the Madurai bench of the Madras High Court till his elevation as a judge of the Madras High Court in June 2017. Ever since the day of adorning the court, Justice Swaminathan, fondly known as GRS, had been remarkable in contributing to the developments of law and its march. As I said earlier, his judgments speak for itself and establish him as a personality in the society. Coming to the topic of the day, a very interesting area as to the illegalities and unauthorized actions in the development of plots and constructions, which had been occupying the courts with huge dockets. We are going to be enlightened on this interesting subject, which form the basis for development of urban spaces in a systematic manner. The enormous knowledge and insight into the subject by the Speaker of the Day will stand to benefit for us. I also welcome the Honorable Judges of the High Court who have joined the session, persons from the subordinate judiciary, senior advocates, and all the members of this group, and express my gratitude for having joined to this session. With these words, I welcome Honorable Justice G.R. Swaminathan to address the session. Before I part, I only remind our members that please ensure that you keep your mics in mute so that the Honorable Judge continues with the session without any interruptions. Now the session is handed over to the Honorable Judge. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Om Prakash sir, for your kind words. When Soshanmukham called me, I thought it's going to be a casual conversation among old friends. The topic, as Om Prakash sir rightly said, it's quite interesting. It starts with approvals for land and buildings, but it doesn't stop there. There is a hyphen followed by illegal and unauthorized perspective of the courts. And since you all want to know what would be the probable view of a judge, I think I have been invited and I hope to do justice to the theme. Before I come to the topic straight away, I thought I would draw a parallel, an analogy. All of us are acquainted with service law. And you know, those days, jobs posts used to be filled up unauthorizedly. There will be recruitment rules, but then the authorities would not follow them. They will simply appoint persons of their choice. There will be backdoor entries. Interviews will not be held. There will not be a selection process. And such appointees, they will be called as a temporary appointees. They will continue in the job for several years. And one day, suddenly, a notification will be issued proposing to fill up the vacancies. And if the vacancies are filled up, then these guys will have to be ousted. So they will file writ petitions before the High Court or OAS before the tribunals asking for regularization. There will be an interim prayer for stay of the selection process. So judges, most of them are soft-hearted. They will think, see, this man has been in this job for so many years. If he's suddenly thrown out, what will happen? What will happen to his family? He may have incurred loan obligations. All right, stay. And the case will be pending for another 10 more years. And ultimately, the courts will say, all right, make them permanent, absorb them on a regular basis. But this will be a one-time measure. That warning will be issued. And in each case, such a warning will be issued. And all these things were, going on for several years. And then came Uma Devi in the year 2006. Supreme Court said, no, we can't permit such backdoor appointments. We can't allow such appointments, rehearse or outside rules to go on. And a real full stop was then given. That was a paradigm shift. So now, I know what you are, I think by now you have understood what I am trying to drive at. See, there are so many tanks, water bodies. Many of them have fallen into disuse. Slowly they will be encroached. Invariably, some poor people or some local ambitious politician who would have taken over the place, plotted them out, given to several people. Innocent people believing it is a genuine plot, they would have purchased it. They would have put up constructions. Several years have gone by. Then one day eviction proceedings will be started. And there are provisions in board standing orders or revenue standing orders which provide for assigning even tank bidlands. There are provisions. And invoking those provisions, the local tahsildar or the collector will issue pattas. These things were also going on. Just like Uma Devi put a full stop to all such illegal things in service law, a series of decisions were pronounced by the Honorable Supreme Court from the middle 1990s. The Madras High Court also, in a number of cases, followed them. But the most important among them all is T.K. Shanmugam versus State. Shanmugam, you have given the citation, na? Shanmugam, you have given the citation to our members?
I will be sharing it, sir. I will be sharing it.
Yes. Anyway, I formally, give it. T.K. Shanmugam versus State, 2015, 6 CTC 369. And to just read this single judgment, you will get a complete grasp for the subject. The full bench judgment was authored by Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul, the then Chief Justice of our High Court. In fact, all the three names of judges are mentioned, all the three names. But then I could make out that this was actually authored only by Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul. A singer like Tyagaraja, each singer will have his own signature or mudra in his poem. Same way, this word predicate you can find in Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul's judgments quite often. So in this judgment also, I came across this word predicate. Therefore, I guessed that even though all the three names are mentioned, this opinion must have actually been authored by Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul only. Please read this judgment fully. This judgment is also rather a small one. You just go through this judgment. You will find a reference to all the earlier judgments. And Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul, or rather this full bench, comes down very heavily on the Tamil Nadu government. See, till then, what the government was doing, it was issuing GOs periodically. If somebody has been in occupation of a Porambok land for say 10 years, yes, give him patta. If he has been there for 5 years, give him patta. And it suits the politicians also. See, to evict somebody from a place, it will invite local backlash. There will be political consequences. Issue patta, it gets you vote. Therefore, it may suit the politician of the day, but it is not good for the society. It is not good for the state. And this negative effect which such assignments bring about, that was strongly highlighted in this T.K. Shanmugam judgment. And the full bench refers to public interest doctrine, public trust doctrine. The court says all these resources, water, land, tanks, whatever, they are all communal properties. They are meant for the entire society at large. You can't divert them for a private purpose. So saying, after referring to all the earlier judgments, the Honorable full bench said, no more regularization of such illegal encroachments. Because encroachment itself is an illegal thing. And you can't say this tank has become dry. It is no longer in use. It has lost its character. Therefore, we'll plot it out. We'll assign. No, you can't say that. It is the duty of the state to restore the tanks to their original condition. So saying, the Honorable full bench struck down all those earlier GOs. Of course, there is a cutoff date. You can't, of course, you cannot undo something that happened 30 years ago or 40 years ago. But after this judgment, no more encroachment of or regularization of water bodies. So the first takeaway for us would be, when somebody approaches whether I can buy this plot, whether I can put up a construction here, the first thing that the advocate should see, or when the case comes, the court will see, is whether it is forming part of a water body. If the court finds that it is forming part of the water body, and I tell you, the result is foregone. You just can't help it. Therefore, since Shanmugam wanted to know what is the perspective of the court, so this will be my first question. Is it forming part of the water body? And if it forms part of the water body, I will simply invoke or quote this full bench T.K. Shanmugam judgment and ask the case. See, people accuse me that whenever a case is filed before me, I feel I have no jurisdiction to dismiss it. I will see how I can grant relief. But if it's a water body matter, then I will have no option, or rather, it will be my painful duty to dismiss the writ petition. This is the first point. Second, see, before I go further, I thought I will take a jump to Income Tax Act. I do not know how many among you are practicing in that branch of law. Of course, Om Prakash sir, as a senior, would have dealt with quite a few IT cases. This is something an interesting one. This was D.S. Sendilvale. Shanmugam, I have not given the citation to you. D.S. Sendilvale versus Tax Recovery Officer. 7/3/2018 is the date of the order. Why I am referring to this is, I don't think it has been reported in our journals. Dated 7/3/2018. See, the facts are this. There is an assessee. He owes money, he owes dues to the Income Tax Department. The Income Tax Department serves demand notice on the assessee under Rule 2, Schedule 2. After he receives the notice, what he does is, he sells away his property. The lands are purchased by the petitioner before me, D.S. Sendilvale. After the purchase took place, attachment is made. Then Sendilvale, the purchaser of the property, moves the department for raising the attachment. The department says, no, I will not raise the attachment. Then, challenging that order, he files a writ petition before me. In fact, the case was argued by a very seasoned tax lawyer. He was a former commissioner himself. He said the case is concluded by earlier case laws. He pointed out quite a few judgments. Somehow I was not convinced. And the case arose under section 281 of the Income Tax Act. Then I went through the rules. There are two rules which are relevant. Rule 51 and Rule 16. Rule 51 says attachment once made will relate back to the date of demand. And then Rule 16 says once somebody served such a demand notice, he is not entitled to deal with the property. He can't sell or mortgage or create lease. See, now have these three things. Section 218 of the IT Act, Rule 51, Rule 16. As I was thinking about all the interplay among this, then something struck me. I decided to take a look at Section 11 of the Indian Contract Act. Section 11 talks about who is competent to contract. Who is competent to contract? Someone who is a major, someone who is not unsound, and who is not disqualified by law, he is competent to contract. But now we come to Rule 16, it disqualifies the assessee who has received a demand notice from dealing with the property. So, applying Section 11, I said the purchase is of no good, no use. Why I am referring to this is, there is a purpose. You take any of the laws relating to land development, Town and Country Planning Act. Who can apply for developing a land? Only the owner or somebody who has been authorized by the owner. Only he can move the authority seeking permission to develop the land. And if on somebody else's land you put up a construction, is the construction legal or unauthorized? No. See, this title investigation is a vast subject. So many aspects are there. And I thought I will use this occasion to acquaint you with one more aspect. I genuinely believe that some of you at least may not have been aware or come across this T.S. Sendilvel judgment. In fact, this I do not know why it has not been reported in our journals, but in the recent edition of Kangan Palkiwala, they have chosen to include this judgment, and it has got a direct bearing on title investigation. And this is the next takeaway for you. All right. I told you that there has been a paradigm shift. And the best example that I can give you is a recent judgment of the Supreme Court in Maradu. Shanmugam, you can give the citation. I think it's 2019, right? Is it 2019? Kerala?
Yes, my lord. It's 2019, Volume 7, SEC 248.
Yes. Like a Twin Tower, the same thing. Here also, two huge towers were put up, all luxury apartments. Scores of people have purchased those apartments. And in fact, when they purchased, they had done title investigation. For putting up those constructions, the local body had in fact given approval. And later it came to be known that a lot of corruption had played a role. And the Vigilance Department went into the issue, and thereafter notices were issued asking as to why the building permits should not be cancelled. The builders went to the High Court, and a single judge allowed the writ petitions. They are set aside. The Coastal Management Authority went to a division bench. The division bench dismissed the writ appeals filed with the authority. Review petitions were also dismissed. Then the matter goes before the Supreme Court. And in the Supreme Court, all the earlier judgments were referred to. Just as in T.K. Shanmugam, if you read T.K. Shanmugam, you will know all the earlier case laws. Same way, if you read this 2019 Maradu case, all the earlier case laws will be, you will find them referred to. What the Supreme Court said? Well, where is this? Where are these two buildings located? They are located near the coast. We have something called CRZ, Coastal Zone Regulations. CRZ, this is CRZ area. They appointed a committee. They actually physically measured it. within what distance from the high tide line these are located. They were found to be located within 200 meters. And within those 200 meters, you cannot have any development, totally prohibited. In such a prohibited zone, how can you have buildings? Merely because the local body has given permission, that will not make the construction legal. So holding that these constructions that are come up with in violation of the CRZ regulations, the Supreme Court said the whole thing is bad, they have to be razed to the ground. In fact, the Kerala government tried to drag its feet, but the Supreme Court put its foot down and in fact threatened to initiate contempt proceedings. And finally, those two buildings were brought down in a controlled explosion. In fact, many of us would have seen in YouTube or WhatsApp, in a matter of say some less than a minute, those huge structures just came crashing down. And what is the takeaway from this Maradu case? It is not enough if you merely see that there are prior planning approvals. A further question must also be put, whether those approvals were validly given. See, so far we have only been seeing putting up a construction without getting a planning approval, that would make it illegal, that would make it unauthorized. So if some approval is there, we may not look beyond it. But from the Maradu case, the further lesson that all of us have to learn is, even if there is an approval, we must do a further probing, a microscopic probing as to whether this approval was validly given. And if you have a judge like Justice Arun Mishra, who will show no mercy, what to do? He will just say, the whole thing is illegal, face the consequence. So saying, the case was, the appeals filed by the Coastal Zone Authority was allowed, and all the few hundred purchases, see the crores of investment, everything gone down the drain. But what to do? The purchasers must have been vigilant. See, when I saw Shiv Shanmugam, when I saw that background, that sea, I was wondering whether he has put up his construction within 50 meters of the high tide line. That is out of concern. I asked him, Sharma, where are you? He said it is only a virtual background. But then these purchasers of Maradu flats, they knew that their building is within this high tide line, and they should have definitely put a question to themselves whether it's okay or not to buy this property. They had not done it. They had not done their due diligence work, and therefore they had to pay a very heavy price. So this is the next takeaway from the Maradu case. All right. One thing more. It is not enough that we just go only by the papers alone. We should also see where the building or the land is located. That would be a very, very important question to ask. All of us know the famous Pleasant Stay Hotel case. All of us know. See, this hotel management moved the Kodaikanal municipality and got permission for putting up a hotel with 2 stories. But their greed was such that they did not stop with the 2 stories. They went by a few more stories. I think they put up 5 stories in all. In hilly regions, there is a committee by name AAA committee. I think Aesthetic Architectural Aspects Committee of hilly regions. AAA committee we call. The AAA committee said, no, for this you have not put up any construction and we cannot permit it. And they said, no, they have to be demolished. But then the minister and the then chief minister, none other than the great lady, Jayalalitha, they said, no, I am exempting this. See, you can corrupt the local people, you can local official, you can corrupt the politician. But if there is some whistleblower or a public interested citizen or an NGO there, then you are in trouble. And in Kodaikanal, you had this Padani Conservation, Hill Conservation Council. an NGO devoted to taking care of the interests of these hill regions. They filed a case in the High Court, and to the great misfortune of this hotel, it went before a bench presided over by none other than the great Justice M. Srinivasan. And what to do? He passed strictures against the government. In fact, the great judge quoted Thirukural and all. And the matter went to Supreme Court, and Supreme Court refused to expunge even the strictures. Of course, it did make a limited remand. The remand was only for how to carry out the demolition, whether the 2 floors alone can be there intact and the remaining should be knocked out or what. Only regarding the manner of carrying out the demolition, a remand was made. So the next question that we should be asking is where the land or the building is located. If it is located in a hill or in a forest, there will be some special rules governing that case also. So, and therefore, as a lawyer, as a judge, we'll have to have a look at those special rules also. If it is any other place, it's enough if we have a look at the Town and Country Planning Act alone. But if it is a place like Kodaikanal, something more is required. You have to look not only at the Town and Country Planning Act, but also look at the relevant rules relating to the hill regions. So the place or the location is also equally important. Friends, now I'll tell you about a case I decided some 2 weeks back. All of you know this Srirangam, well-known pilgrimage center. There, a marriage was to be celebrated in the year 2004. When Guru Rajan was to marry one Jayashri, all the ceremonies had got concluded, and the tali was about to be tied. And before that, they belong to Madhva community. Certain ceremonies will have to be performed. The groom has to stand on this side, the bride on this side. There will be a screen in the middle. Those ceremonies were going on. The videographer wanted to take a pakka picture. He wanted to get the best possible angle. Therefore, his assistant held up the focus lamp. It came in touch with the decoration papers, which caught fire. Then the pandal caught fire. The whole thing came crashing down. See, the marriage was being solemnized in the terrace portion, and people were trying to rush downstairs. Many of them couldn't. As many as 64 persons died, and 33 persons suffered burn injuries. When the appeal came before me, I confirmed the conviction of the building owner. See, the building was put up after getting approval, everything pakka, no issue. But how then the building owner became criminally liable? See, now comes the question of user. It was a residential building. If you have got approval for putting up a residential building, you can use it only as a residential building. You cannot make it as a Kalyana Mandapam. And a residential building was illegally converted into a Kalyana Mandapam. And therefore, following that Upkar cinema tragedy case, I said an occupier is liable towards every person who comes there. See, there is something called public building. And we have got the Public Buildings Act also, I think 1965. See, a cinema hall, a school, a Kalyana Mandapam. These are all places which are visited by the general public. Therefore, such buildings will have to have a license. They need clearance from the Fire Services Department. They need a structural stability certificate. So many formalities are there. And even if such a license is issued, it is valid only for 3 years. There has to be renewal. Therefore, when we talk about illegality and unauthorized buildings, we need to look at the user also. This is the next takeaway. What is the use to which the building is being put to? So that is another point that we'll have to bear in mind. And and I get quite a few cases from Kanyakumari district. Let me be very brutally frank when I discuss the facts. Kanyakumari is a very sensitive place to speak in communal terms. And what some people will do is they will buy a house, duly approved residential building. Then it will be converted into a place of worship. Then the opposite religionists, whether they are Hindus or Christians, they will oppose it. Police and the revenue will step in. Then these people will file a writ petition in the High Court saying they are, after all, exercising their right to religion under Article 25, and that therefore they should not be interfered with. That will be the prayer. When such cases come to me, I say, just have a look at the relevant provisions in the building rules, whether it be municipal building rules or the panchayat building rules. I think it's Rule 4 or Rule 6, depending on the municipality or its panchayat. There will be provisions which say that if you want to put the land or the house site to use for a religious purpose, or you want to put up a place of worship there, you need to get clearance from the district collector, and it has to be a prior permission. It cannot be a ratification letter. It must be a prior permission. And unless you get a prior permission, you can't use the place for putting up a church or a mosque or a temple, or you can't even use for religious use. Therefore, when we talk of illegality and unauthorized nature, the use is also another factor that should be borne in mind. That's it. And one other thing, one very important thing that I wanted to tell you was to draw your attention to the famous Consumer Action Group case. Consumer Action Group versus State of Kerala, sorry, State of Tamil Nadu. I think it is a 2006, Shanmugam, right?
Yes, my lord. 2006, volume 4 CTC,
Yes,
page
yes.
432.
You see, you take any act in any branch of law, there will always be a provision for relaxation. See, if the statutory provisions are applied as such, they may produce hardship. They may have some serious, unfortunate consequences. Therefore, the government or the authority concerned is always having the power to grant exemption, to grant relaxation. This power is something that should always be there. But this power should be used for a larger cause, for genuine public interest, or to really alleviate an individual hardship. But then in any democratic society, you have these pulls and pressures. If a large number of people, they have put up an unauthorized construction, what they will do? They will move the local MLA, and the local MLA will move the government, and he will say, if you grant exemption to all these people, then we'll have a full pakka vote bank here. And that is how, this 113 of the Town and Country Planning Act was being abused like anything. And Consumer Action Group filed a writ petition, I think in 1988 or 89, before the Honorable Supreme Court, challenging it. And during the pendency of the writ petition, this 113A was introduced. But the Honorable Supreme Court upheld the provision. But while so upholding, the Supreme Court clearly said, see, this is a one-time measure. You can't keep on granting exemptions. You have to put a full stop at some point of time or the other. This was the categorical warning issued by the Supreme Court. But who bothers about the Supreme Court or the courts? For the politician, the necessity or the need is something different. Therefore, they brought in this 113B. Though the Supreme Court case was decided sometime in 1999 itself, the Tamil Nadu government wanted to grant exemption of all the illegally constructed buildings up to the year 2001. Then they wanted to extend even up to the year 2002. See, this cutoff date, this goalpost was getting shifted from time to time. And the CAG promptly challenged this move of the government, and the case came before the Honorable Division Bench, headed by Chief Justice A.P. Shah. And in a very, very hard-hitting judgment, the Honorable First Bench said, we are striking down the whole thing. Whatever happened up to this February 1999 is okay. But the illegality that happened later, that cannot be validated. That cannot be legalized. That cannot be regularized. Very, very hard-hitting judgment. You just have to read this CAG versus State, 2006 judgment of Justice A.P. Shah and Chandru, and you will have a complete grasp of this subject. See, in fact, Justice A.P. Shah warned, see, these rules are meant for the benefit of the people. They are meant to ensure that the urban health is taken care. He said, if you are flouting all these rules, we are running into grave trouble. That was a warning issued by the Honorable First Bench. But then again, these warnings were not heeded to, and as a result, we faced those terrible Chennai floods. In the version 15 or 16? 2015?
15.
2015. In fact, the occurrence of the Chennai floods due to this urban mismanagement was spoken to by the Honorable Supreme Court in a subsequent judgment also. Therefore, if these judgments, if this CAG judgment is seen, we will know as to why the courts have suddenly become so strict. And there's another aspect also. I told you, if I see that it is a part of the water body, I'll become strict. Same way, if I see that the construction has come up on a place earmarked as a park, then also the approach of the court will become different. See, the earliest case law is Bangalore Medical Trust versus Buddappa. I think 1991. I don't know the full citation. In the year 1991, the Honorable Supreme Court said, see, if in a layout, a place has been earmarked for a public purpose, say park, see, it has to remain only as a park forever. You can't change the user. See, what the layout promoter will do, see, when somebody wants to develop a chunk of land, say 10 grounds or so, or 15 grounds or so, 10% of it will go towards public purpose, putting up roads, park, etc. And the remaining 90% he can plot out. But what this fellow will do is, he is expected to execute a donation deed conveying the park to the local body. He will not do. And the local body also will not be asking. And this will remain like a left out plot alone. And after 10 years after the layout was done, after, some innocent guy will say, I can buy this plot. He'll take the plot. He'll put up a construction. Then he will have some fight with the neighbor. The neighbor will now, use this. He will go to the court, say this was originally earmarked as a park. How this man could have purchased this? And the court, will have to be, I'll be really helpless if the matter comes before me. So this Bangalore Medical Trust versus Buddappa 1991 was consistently followed by in all the subsequent judgments. See, even 2 days back, the Karnataka High Court, while issuing notice said, the Karnataka government wanted to develop this smart city project. They had proposed to put up a construction on Nehru Maidan. And Karnataka High Court said, yes, you make this into a smart city, happy. But then in the process, you cannot swallow playgrounds. See, in fact, in Tamil Nadu also, there is one special statute called, I think there 1957, Playfields Act. In fact, it says every local authority must maintain a register in which all these grounds are maintained. The details regarding the grounds, playgrounds, the survey numbers are carefully maintained. Correct. Parks and Playfields Act. See, just as you can't put up a construction and a park. In a playground also, one cannot put up a construction. So these are some of the various aspects that the courts will definitely take note of when a case comes before it. See, all of you are almost all of you are lawyers. So probably I had sounded so pessimistic and negative. Therefore, to give you some boost, I will refer to two decisions. One is Godrej and Boys Manufacturing Company Limited versus State of Maharashtra, 2014, 3 SEC 430. A very 2014, 3 SEC 430. See, this was a case where some illegal development of a private forest had taken place. The Supreme Court, the matter goes right up to the persons who had purchased the property. They had lost out before the High Court. They go before the Supreme Court. Interestingly, the Supreme Court, while holding that an unauthorized construction must be razed to the ground, it says that there is something called practical application of the principle. You can't, apply this principle in every case. There might be cases where there is a collusion between the builder and the local body. The state could have remained asleep for years together, and somebody, an innocent guy, without knowing all this, had invested his hard-earned money. Should we simply raise down the building? What will happen? So saying, the Supreme Court chose to grant a sort of, an indulgence in that case. Maybe if you read the judgment, when a case of that nature comes before you, you can invoke that Godrej and Boys logic, and it is by a 3 judges bench of the Supreme Court. So probably it may come to your rescue to some extent. And another recent judgment is the DLF case. See, in this case also, the Kerala Coastal Management Authority, just like in Maradu case, went to, but the Supreme Court imposed a fine of 1 crore on DLF and let it go scot-free. And that's 2018, 2 SEC 203. 2018, 2 SEC 203. So I think this Godrej and Boys case and DLF case, I think for lawyers who may want to defend such cases, I think only these two are some kind of, I do not see any other citation that can probably come to your rescue. Friends, before I conclude, I thought I will tell you a story from Mahabharata. See, all of us, heard of Parikshit. Parikshit was the son of Abhimanyu and the grandson of Arjuna. He died due to a snake bite. And do you know how that happened? See, there are two versions here. Arjuna wanted to develop a new capital, Indraprastha, the modern Delhi. And they decided to burn down a forest, the Khandava forest, for raising a city. So how to clear the forest? Easy ways to simply set it aflame. And they burned down the entire forest. And in that process, the wife of Takshak, the king of snakes, she died. Takshak was away, and that is who he escaped. And in order to avenge the death of his wife, Takshak bit the grandson of Arjuna and caused his death. This is a story that you find in Mahabharata. And I came across the story recently. In Arunachal Pradesh, the government wants to put up some big dam. And the author says, you can destroy forests, you can destroy rivers, but then you will have to pay a price ultimately. And in that context, this Parikshit story was recounted. It's all, if you look at it as a standalone event, then you will not be able to appreciate. But if you take the big picture into account, it is this land, putting up buildings. They can't be done in any way we want. See, if water courses are destroyed, ultimately the public, the society has to pay a price. Just as Parikshit paid a price for the burning down of the forest by his grandfather Arjuna, the coming generations may pay a price if we are unmindful of the ecological and environmental cost. See, in fact, Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul in T.K. Shanmugam case uses the word environment capital. And if we deplete that environmental capital, the consequences will be disastrous. So, to answer the question of Siva Shanmugam, what will be the perspective of the court when a matter concerning illegal, unauthorized development comes before the court? The court will see whether this deviation is only marginal or it is substantial. Whether this, if by condoning this deviation, no major consequence will ensue, or whether the public interest will seriously suffer. Those questions will be posed by the court. Depending on those answers, the outcome of the litigation will depend. That, in my view, would be the perspective of a court or a judge. Thank you.
Mr. Murthy to say the vote of thanks.
I can say that I have a unique qualification in adducing vote of thanks for the day on behalf of the study circle, as Justice GRS and I and some of the participants here.
Roommates.
Roommates, yes. Chandraguptan and Ramesh, who are also here. I've studied law for the first 2 years together. As students, we felt that Justice GRS was a judge material, and our judgment was proved to be correct. Justice GRS is known for his versatile and very knowledgeable jurist. His speech started from service law of backdoor entry, income tax, contract act, and then to the topic of the day. We saw how the approach from lenient approach to the present view, so the quote which is restorative. The speech was not only inculcated knowledge on the subject, but it also put us through an overview of judicial approach. We in all have been benefited by his lordship's intellectual speech. We know his schedule and his vast reading. In his busy schedule, he was kind enough to share his views and enriched our knowledge. We thank his lordship on behalf of the study circle for the same. We also thank the presiding officer of the DRT, Dr. N.V. Badrinath, and also other judges who are all present as participants. We also thank all the participants for being present in large numbers. Thanks.